Okay. All right, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. So I think we had better begin so that we can move forward because we have a fair amount to cover. So for today, we are going to talk about one, welcome back. So great that we are together and that everyone has power and yes, that we are not having a Portland freakout or a region freakout over the weather. Today we're going to talk about community engagement, just get an update on where we are with the community engagement process. We're going to talk about our group definition of equity and how we are thinking about that in our work, and looking at infusing equity into the purpose and needs statement for this project, which is very exciting. So before we, to kind of kick us off, I want to have our program administrator, Greg Johnson, talk with us. And so I'm going to turn it to Greg, and then we will proceed.
Well, I guess it's still afternoon, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you once again for giving of your time to help us shape what this program is going to look like. So we have some good information that we want to put in front of this group to make sure that you guys are seeing what the team is seeing and hearing what we're hearing as far as community input and some possible language for purpose and need. So it's going to be a interesting night, and once again, it's something that is going to kickstart the conversation and lead us to what our final purpose and need and vision and values may look like coming out of this group as well as the other advisory groups. So once again, thank you. And we've been having a lot of different meetings around the area, have been busy doing presentations. So everybody is vastly interested in what these groups are doing. So you guys are the center of attention, the bells of the ball. So we're gonna do some good stuff tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So one of the inclusion measures that we wanted to implement was that before people spoke, that they shared their name. So as we go through and talk today, please, before you speak, please say your name and then go for your point. And so with that, I want to pass to the communications team to talk about community engagement. I think that's you, Lisa.
It is. Thank you, Dr. Hunt.
Wait,
Lisa.
Sorry.
One sec. Wanted to go over just the captions and that kind of housekeeping stuff real quick. Mm-hmm. Hold on. Let me pull up my screen. All right. So, reminder: closed captioning is available, and that's within Zoom. And for those of you who are on YouTube, you can follow the link to view those. The link is https://www.screentext.net/player?event=IBR. That's www.screentext.net/player?event=IBR.
Jake?
Yeah.
We can't see anything.
You can't see anything?
No, I just know that you started screen sharing.
Oh, Is this showing closed
Now
captioning?
now we can see that.
Okay, weird. Good deal. So sorry about that. Hopefully those of you who see it. Those of you who heard me say the link out loud, hopefully you've got it. You can also access closed captioning the bottom right of your Zoom screen. There's a menu of options, and one of them says CC closed caption. And thank you to our closed captioner here, Lauren. Really appreciate it. For members of the public, there will be an opportunity to provide public input later in the meeting. But if you want to submit input after the meeting, you can also do that. You can email comments to info@interstatebridge.org. info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call to do that. The number is 360-905-1560 and state EAG Public Comment. The phone number again is 360-905-1560 and state EAG Public Comment. I'm going to, okay, now we're ready for you, Lisa. Sorry about that.
I was so excited. Thank you for having me here. Lisa Kiyohokaloli Shower, and I am a member of the Strategic Communications team. And some of you have seen me with my partner, John L. Bell, facilitating the Community Advisory Group. I am going to share with you a little bit about what we have heard from the community as it relates to the conversations that we've started February throughout the month. And so there's a lot of different ways in which we have reached out to better understand where our community is as it relates to purpose and need and vision and values. I could spend hours telling you about all of the different things that we've learned and even beginning to share a little bit about some of our key insights, but we really want to give you a fairly high level because we haven't been able to really dive into all of the different themes that we're hearing because we had such an impressive response. Greg mentioned he's been on the speaker circuit already. We've had a lot of interest in presentations, and so we're still in the process of quantifying all of the information that we've received, but we don't want to wait. We want to make sure that you're hearing as soon as we start to collect that information. And this is the first group out of the 3 advisory groups that will be able to take part in seeing our initial findings and being able to go through our process a bit. So with that, let's take a look at the next slide. This is a summary of the engagement and outreach activities. We conducted an online open house. We facilitated within that online open house an interactive survey. We had community briefing events. We had 4 of those events, 3 of which were in English and 1 was in Spanish. Our program website facilitates bringing people in and asking them to provide us comments. We've utilized social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We had direct stakeholder engagement through organization and multicultural outreach. And then we've also quantified the public comments that we've received. Our group input is from those 3 critical parts of our advisory group strategy, which includes the equity advisory group, as well as the executive steering group and the community advisory group. We're launching 2 listening sessions for each of these 2 groups that are listed, communities of concern and youth ages 16 to 24. I think we've had a little bit of outreach to this group in terms of helping us to reach out to those communities so that we can create those opportunities to get some more feedback. Next slide. Our outreach included not only social media, but some old school direct mail postcards, 53,000 in the program area. We did some advertisements in print newspapers, online newspapers, e-newsletters. We hosted a 3-week digital campaign. We even did some radio advertisements, and then the outreach to community-based organizations and telephone outreach. So a lot of different ways we tried to reach the community to seek their input this is the beginning of a conversation. And we are learning from and measuring the effectiveness of each of these tools so that we can continue to build on the efforts that we've started here. Next slide. One of the areas that's gotten quite a bit of attention is around the interactive survey. And we are pleased to have had over 9,000 total survey participants. And we received over 14,000 open-ended comments. And I'll share with you a little bit more about how those comments came in through this interactive survey. This is an opt-in survey, and it does provide a window into broad perspectives, but it is not everything. As we look at what the community is telling us, this is not the only way in which we're listening. And so it is really important that we make sure that we're clear in terms of the open-ended survey comments. We anticipate a final report will be published by the end of this month. It's not a significantly statistical survey within a margin of error like you might see from other research surveys. And it's not necessarily demographically representative of the program area. We'll talk a little bit more about race and income and age. And it is not inclusive of extensive input from the houseless community or those members of the community without internet access. Why this is important is that we recognize this is one piece of all of our outreach efforts. It's an important one, and we're going to share with you our what we've heard through the quantitative input, but we also want to make sure that you hear us when we say that we think our outreach is much broader than just a survey. Next slide.
Charlie, stop it.
So the participation demographics by zip code, we took a look at those that participated and which areas within the program. And we did see a pretty significant amount of participation from the Northeast Portland neighborhoods, such as Kenton, St. John's, Linton, and Irvington. And then we saw on the Washington side of the river, quite a bit of survey respondents that were focused in some of those outlying areas beyond the program area, such as Hazeldale, Orchards, Philida, Ridgefield, and Battleground. Next slide. I mentioned that we would talk a little bit more about the participation demographics. So of the 9,291 participants, not all of them responded to this question. And so on the age slide, where we asked if respondents were interested in sharing their age, we had 6,000 responses. For race, we had 6,400 responses, and income, about 5,600 responses. So this was an area where folks had the opportunity to either choose to participate or not. And we did notice that 73% of the respondents were Caucasian. And so it is important that we are finding other ways to reach other members of our community. Next slide. We asked about the transportation problems and to priority and rank the top 3 transportation problems. And these were the results. So congestion and reliability was the first, earthquake vulnerability, transportation safety, limited public transit, impaired freight movement, and inadequate bike and pedestrian. Next slide. The next activity that we asked for participants to provide us input was around mapping the problem area. We had 20,000 markers that were placed here, and those markers and the colors represent, we had a significant amount of participation where map markers were placed actually on the bridge or directly within I-5 on both sides of the river. The hot spots, so the purple, which represents thousands of responses. So if you're viewing the map, you'll see that there was anywhere from 3,000 to almost 4,000 responses of areas of problem actually on and going on and off the bridge. And this map is kind of showing that there's a lot of problem areas that were identified. And we're digging into when you were able to put a problem, to map a problem area, you could add a description. We haven't gone through all of the data describing exactly what the problems experienced are. and there were different modes that you could choose to identify the problem. We had over 11,000 pins that identified congestion within that category as a problem. The activity that was the third and last activity that we asked participants to provide input was around community values. We asked them to rank their top 2. There were 6 responses possible and a significant amount, over 5,000 open-ended responses to these values. This is an area that we think we can spend more time as a community looking at establishing that community vision and value for this bridge replacement program. I'm just going to name these relatively quickly. We don't have a lot of time. And so I want to make sure that in particular, I'm mentioning the first value that we looked at was the commitment to equity, and the response and prioritization of those that participated in the survey was around a strong focus on transportation for low-income travelers, people with disabilities, and non-drivers. And the second response that was among the top 2 priorities was minimizing impacts on neighboring communities. There was also prioritization around the environment, safety, and reliability. Next slide. Cost and funding, transit and multimodal, and economy and community. Next slide. Beyond the interactive survey that I just kind of shared some of those findings, we also conducted the 4 community briefing events. And we thought it was important to help the community understand where the program was. And so that's what these briefing events were about. We did have live participation through an audience survey. And that audience survey, one of the questions that was asked was, what are the problems you experience with the interstate bridge? And 34% of the 195 total live participants highlighted congestion and reliability. Next slide. This slide is describing what we heard in the last EAG meeting relative to purpose and need and vision and values. The themes that we felt like resonated with this EAG was not to further harm communities who have been historically victimized in the corridor, to focus on access to opportunities both created directly by the program and resulting from the program's improvements, to collaborate with and empower diverse communities throughout the course of the program, and to always consider affordability and impacts on those with low income. Next slide. We also conducted some similar focused questions with the community advisory group, and the themes that we saw with the KEG included growing travel demand and congestion as the problem the program most needs to address, an emphasis on designing a program that meets future community needs, and that seismic vulnerability is the second most critical problem in the program area. Next slide. Our direct stakeholder engagement included the 331 organizations that we contacted via email, and then we had 66 phone calls and emails that are still ongoing to reach those community-based organizations. We asked multicultural liaisons through the Community Engagement Liaison Program to go out in the 8 different languages and to meet with the community, help complete the surveys and or over the phone, be able to input the survey responses from each of those communities. And we had more than 300 of those surveys completed. I mentioned some of our social media engagement. We utilize social media to try and drive participation, not only in the interactive survey, but also to provide public comments and to reach out to us to schedule a community briefing, which we've had many presentations. We've got 5 of which are this week, including 2 neighborhood associations. We've had over 146 total comments that have been received in the month of February. Next slide. So what's next? I mentioned we have those listening sessions with the communities of concern and the youth. We have 2 of those listening sessions this Thursday. I hope that you can help us try to reach those that might be interested in participating. It'll be a very different event, not like the community briefing events. We'll provide a couple-minute overview of where the program is, and then we're going to ask some questions and get some input. The listening sessions with youth are Monday, March 15th. So if you have anyone that you can think of that might have a perspective that they want to share and they'd like to participate, we'd love to have them be part of this listening session. 2 opportunities for each group. We're in the process of developing key takeaways and finalizing a community engagement report that summarizes what we've heard. We're on track for May 2021 to have a final purpose and need statement and a final vision and value statement. And then by the summer of 2021, we anticipate working with the advisory groups and the public to begin a screening criteria and alternatives development. We have Elise with us here tonight, and she is a graphics illustrator and artist. And one of the things that we're trying to do is find ways to summarize what we've heard in other ways than an 8-page document that summarizes the notes from a meeting. And so what Elise is doing today is going to take advantage of the time that we have together to create a graphics illustration of what the dialogue was today, not only around purpose and need and vision and values, but also around defining equity. And then we'll have something that we'll be able to showcase with the other advisory groups and the community at large. So that is a very quick overview of what we are hearing and the outreach that we've done around purpose and need and vision and values with the community. I'm a couple minutes over my time. Sorry about that.
Well, that's great and so exciting. So much exciting work. You did ask for questions. Do people have any questions for Lisa? We can take a couple minutes for questions. So I'm going to assume for the good of the order that we're good to move on. So, okay, head nods. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thumbs up. Appreciate you. Okay, so I want to pass to Jake, and Jake's going to start us off with our defining equity, thinking about how do we have shared language around it, and from the equity, our definition of equity is part of what will be applied as we move forward. So getting clear about what that is. So passing to Jake. Thank you, Roberta.
So based on previous conversations we've had at the last couple meetings and looking at, as we shared, kind of the region's definitions of the way different agencies are defining it, compiled all that and tried to incorporate all of your ideas. I thought there was a lot of great language that we tried to include, and I sent that out just about a couple hours ago. So hopefully you got that. I don't blame you if you haven't had a chance to review it, but I'm gonna pull it up, and then we'll have a conversation about it because this defining equity is one of the key things that this committee is charged with doing, and it will really influence a lot of the program's activities and how we look at them and how we evaluate whether we're doing things in an equitable way. So the definition here, and there's kind of 2 parts. One is, just a straight up defining what we mean. And then the next is kind of saying what that definition means in terms of our commitment. So the draft definition here says that the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program defines equity as both a process and an outcome. Process equity means centering and empowering the voices of communities who have historically been disenfranchised and excluded from decision-making processes in transportation projects, while providing resources to address barriers to meaningful participation. And outcome equity means ensuring access to the economic opportunities and transportation benefits created by the program while avoiding further harm to historically marginalized and underserved communities in the program area. You know, the one thing that we heard from you is try to keep it as concise as possible. This is a lot of words, certainly, because there is a lot of good ideas, but as we go into the discussion, happy to get ideas on how we can be closer to something that's very clear and concise. But then the other part of this definition is what it means in terms of our commitment. And so it involves several things. Applying this definition to the program includes a commitment to honoring the history of Indigenous peoples who have lived in the program area since time immemorial, maintaining transparency and accountability in program processes and decisions, acknowledging historic, present, and potential future inequities that includes displacement and burdens related to transportation costs, and identifying strategies to address these inequities, and proactively engaging members of the following communities. So BIPOC communities, it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, communities with limited English proficiency, persons experiencing low income, houseless individuals and families, immigrants and refugees, and young people. So, we're gonna have a group discussion now, and we want to, one of the ideas here, the big idea here is we want to not necessarily, I guess, wordsmith and you know, kind of really go too deep into the weeds as far as the specific language, but there certainly could be some of that if there are some key terms that are missing or should be reframed. But just we want to gather thoughts as far as what you like about this definition and whether there are things that can be refined so that it better guides the program towards equity. And something that we should keep in mind is this definition should lend itself to us being able to figure out how we're going to measure equity, how we're going to really evaluate whether the outcomes and the processes are both equitable. So hopefully you all have the document if you in front of you. If you don't, so I emailed it just right around 3 p.m. It's a Word document and it has that full text on it. But I guess I might as well, I can just pull up and we can kind of go through this. You can either share your thoughts on either side of it, that commitment side or this basic definition, whatever you'd like to do. So yeah, I will just open it up to that. And looks like
yeah, I see a few hands are up here. I see Steve and Lily.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm just trying to unpack the outcome equity piece. We start off by saying outcome equity means ensuring access, and the first word there that catches my eye is economic opportunities. And I'm trying to unpack it in the context of just the bridge. What assumptions are we making by saying outcome equity as it relates is economic opportunities? What else is missing? So I think we just need to unpack the assumptions that we are making around outcome equity, starting at it from an economic perspective, even though we are saying in the others that it includes those, but those are just the, those are the first things that hit me first. It's like, well, for some people, it could be an economic opportunity, but for others, it could not be in terms of outcomes if we're thinking that way. So we might just need to unpack that a little bit. Thank you.
And Jono, maybe you can respond briefly about a part of what we mean by
that. Well, I think your point is well taken. I mean, teasing that out, and maybe just to add a little bit of additional commentary. I think whatever equity definition that we ultimately come up with to some degree will be one part sort of living and breathing document. It may evolve over time, and so it's not something that necessarily will be etched in stone, because as our thinking evolves, I think over a period of time, we'll routinely look at our definition to make sure that we are in fact living up to the stated goal. But with respect to the economic opportunity element, I think that what that is attempting to get at is around both the construction opportunities that we've heard from this group quite a bit, making sure that when the project is built, we're building it in a way that is meaningfully engaging historically marginalized communities in terms of contracting opportunities, in terms of workforce opportunities. So that was part of the economic opportunity piece. But I think your point is still well taken, and I think that could probably utilize more refinement as we think about what are some of those other elements around outcome equity. So good thought.
Yeah, thanks, Janelle. I think we can bring the word opportunities first, and then the rest follows.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Lily. Lily.
Thank you. I guess, thanks. Sorry, I'm on a little bit of a delay, so my apologies if I interrupt somebody. I guess my responses to this are similar to the feedback that I've had over the last 2 meetings, which is that I really think we're not aiming very high. If this is not quite at the level that I would like to see it. I see a lot of words like avoiding further harm, which just is not impressive to me. I would really hope that this group could seek to repair things rather than just not cause more harm. And maybe we're not even committing to not causing further harm. We're just saying we'll try to avoid it. Which is, I think it's a really low bar. I also am concerned with words like access. Just providing access is not the same thing as providing an informed opportunity, right? So we all have different our various privileges and lack of privileges impact the way that we can take advantage of access. And I still feel like that's a really low bar of just saying, well, it's here. And, you know, if you've got the resources, you can take advantage of it. So I'll say that. I know I keep bringing that up at each meeting, but I guess I just feel like I need to say it again. The other thing is that I really don't know how this will, to Jake's point, I don't know how this definition will lead to a viable assessment plan. The outcome measures are really focused on effort rather than impact. And I would really like to see a shift in that. Counting connections is a great thing to do, but that does not tell us about wealth generation and job creation and mortgages getting paid and you know, kids going to college. Like I mean, I know that I'm extending the scope here, but I'm doing so to make a point, which is that just offering opportunities for people to be heard is not the same thing as undoing the harm that has been done to our communities. So I know that I say this every time, so I'll stop there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yolanda?
Hi, Lily. I liked what you had to say. That was awesome. Just 2 things. In process equity, when it says, it mentions centering and empowering the voices. How do you expect it? The talk is good, but how do you expect to actually do it? And on outcome equity, when it says, and you mentioned this before, ensuring access, instead of ensuring access, what about enforceable and mandatory economic opportunities for underrepresented communities versus access to the economic opportunities?
Anna?
Yeah, hi. I guess my question is around investing time and effort to redefine these definitions. Will these definitions would carry on after once the process is ready? Once, for instance, for example, the economic opportunity. I know because my husband's in construction, so I know when it comes to selecting a contractor for the projects, there's a lot of factors to consider. I'm just wondering, is this process will carry over so they can implement it and they can put it into practice, and that way they use equity to select the right contractors? Is that what is going to happen?
Janelle?
Yeah, and I'll let our administrator speak a little on this as well. So the goal of the equity definition is in fact to be a guide, a North Star, if you will, to help guide the program towards equitable outcomes all the way from now through construction. And so the thinking is it will in fact be an element that will help ensure that we are surrounding ourselves with construction partners, other partners who also meet the goals that we espouse here. But Greg, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, Jono, thank you. We have been uniquely empowered in this team to change the way the DOTs have done business in the equity realm. Both DOT leadership teams are committed to not doing business the way business was done. One thing I want to remind people of, in the end, this is a construction project, and we can do some creative and innovative things. And we're going to push the envelope. We cannot solve all of society's problems with a construction project. We can make a statement. We can do some incredibly innovative things. I don't want you guys to take this as I guess a negative, but we have to operate in the realm of, we're going to be using federal dollars, and those federal dollars do come with some strings. Now, once again, we can push the envelope because we have commitments of equity, of climate. So I'm hearing these, and I just don't want you guys to become negative to the definition that once we start saying, okay, here are the actions that we are going to take, I think that it will be different and better than anything that we have done in the past. And I can't guarantee you that it's going to satisfy every want and desire, but it is going to be different and it's going to be better. So this is going to be a template for how both of these DOTs move forward in the future. So we're going to push the comfort zone, but once again, in the end, this is a construction project with federal dollars in it, and with those federal dollars come strings. So I need people to be aware of that reality.
Thank you, Greg. Sabrina?
Thank you. So I think the thing that I like about this definition is that process and outcomes are broken out into kind of two separate definitions, and I appreciate the effort to try and keep it all tight. On the outcomes piece, I think there's two things that I generally think about in kind of defining what equity is on a project. Think about for who or whom, and how are we defining success, or how are we going to know that we've done what we said we were going to do. And I feel like those two pieces are missing for me for a little bit. Kind of two suggestions. In the applying this definition section, the listing under the proactive engagement, I think is really helpful of the communities we're seeking to engage. I guess I wonder if we want to also attach that to that's who we want to see outcomes for as well. And for that not to just be about engagement. And then the second piece, which I feel like a few people have hinted at, is I wonder under that section as well on the approach, if we want something that speaks to kind of that more measurable, concrete benefits that we want to see to community. Because I know we're not in a place where we can kind of spell out, what are the job creation, the environmental benefits right now, but for that to be a part of how we're going to do this work is that we want kind of concrete outcomes that we want to see that are going to advance equity, that are going to support accountability.
Thank you. Nicotris?
Hi, I like the way I kind of second some of the things that Sabrina said. I really do like the way that the commitment is spelled out. I have more questions than I do comments. One is, I do have thoughts around some of the wording, but also heard that this is not the place to wordsmith, but also saw that we were trying to finish this. So what does that look like? Because I have some comments, but I don't want to belabor the conversation. The other thing is that this is the definition, and can you explain what's next? Because the commitments, like all this is fine if we are going to now next create our metrics, right? And how does this tie to the type of bidding process for the construction projects that we'll have? And so I think the definition being overarching, and again, I do have some word suggestions, but that stuff being true, the stuff that I think that a lot of us are talking about or thinking about might not live in the definition. So can you tell us what else will come here where we really can hone in on how we think about outcomes, impact, long-term, and some things that I don't think we'll be able to necessarily restore some of the harm that's been done, but what it would look like to be able to actively and very clearly say, this is how we're going to prevent harm and ensure that this project does have positive economic impact on communities that have been historically excluded from this space.
Right. I'll go ahead, Greg.
John, if I can jump in on this one. We have been wrestling with this issue of rhetoric versus action. And it's been whether words appear in purpose and need, or are we looking for actionable outcomes that speak to exactly, Nicotris, what you were speaking of. And so I've circulated a document to our team to take a look at. And it was from a project that I worked on early on in Detroit. And once again, it was a bridge project, similar dollars, connecting Detroit and Windsor, Canada. And they created an actionable document that spoke to what the community wanted to see specifically, measurable, actionable things. So this definition is fine. This is something that we can hone and get a great definition, but in the end, it's going to be the actions that are committed to by both DOTs and the enforcement of those words in a document, I think, are going to be where you're going to see the results that we are speaking of. So I think getting a definition is great. That gets us in the ballpark. But eventually we're going to have to hone down into specific things. We're going to have to look at DBE percentages. We're going to have to look at how we look at getting folks jobs and training, apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships on this project. Those are some of the hard measurable numbers and outcomes that I think this team wants to see. And we can't solve it in the definition, but we can create commitment documents that say, this is what we want and what we expect.
That's exactly right. And just to add to that, the definition becomes a barometer by which we both hold ourselves accountable as a project, but also helpful as we say as a project that we're centering equity to the broader community. The next question is, well, tell us what does that mean? And so it becomes a tool by which we communicate how we are defining equity. So that's number one. The second piece is, so what happens after, and the feedback we're hearing tonight is exactly what we want to hear. It just reminds me of how impressive this group is. And Greg, you've been in the transportation game a lot longer than I, but I think most projects would be hard pressed to have such a great group of equity leaders really discussing what equity could look like in a mega project. And so just the brilliance in this virtual room, I think, is going to continue to keep us on the cutting edge. But what happens next is, after we refine an equity definition, and I would encourage folks to send to us your comments and additional thoughts and edits. We'll do our best to try to synthesize and try to get something that both keeps us within the confines of the law. As Greg indicated, we are still a federal project that has some limitations in terms of the legal framework, but also makes it very clear in terms of what our commitments are on the equity piece. But the next piece will be the equity framework. And so the definition is going to be part and parcel to the equity framework. Other things that will be in the framework we'll talk about at our next meeting, but that's when we'll start having conversations around measurable desired outcomes, right? You define equity, then you have to determine, as everyone's indicated, how do you measure towards success? And so we're going to spend some time kind of teasing that out. And so that's what happens next to COFRIS is the equity framework.
Matt?
Hi, this is Matt. So thanks, Greg, and thanks, John L, for kind of drilling down a little bit on that. I guess I just want to share my perspective in listening to other people. Part of my feedback is about accountability, but also part of it is about kind of just taking a deep breath and understanding that maybe we're just rushing this too much. I'll give an example. This definition talks about not causing harm any further. I mean, but just to be blunt, we're theoretically still causing harm. We sent out an interactive survey to a population that had no ability to read it independently. And that's just one process that I've picked through, along with a few others through this process, where we're not actually meeting our commitment to even why we're being here in the first place already. And so I'm just trying to throw up a stop sign and saying, maybe we need to dive a little bit deeper into some of these really serious equity issues and accountability right now before we start talking about future accountability. And then also talking, I've sat here and I've mentioned how I feel like disability is missing when we talk about opportunity. And, I know that we have things in, as far as federal dollars that we have to divvy out, and we have to make sure that everyone's falling under the right opportunity and as relates to those dollars. But I've also mentioned in some ways too that there's not always going to be some sort of federal protection or program that is going to ensure equal access for opportunity for all historically marginalized communities. So I'm just trying to get us to think about all these things and kind of just put up a stop sign about our equity definition until we get our house in order.
Thank you, Matt. Caitlin?
Hi, everyone. This is Caitlin with City Portland PBOT. And thanks so much. I mean, Matt, that was an excellent comment. I think everyone's had really great contributions so far. I just, in reviewing this, I also wanted to acknowledge, I think it's great to separate out the process and the outcome pieces. I think that they are different, both equally critical and important and totally interdependent. So, we can't be successful on one and ignore the other, because then we would not be successful at all, and vice versa. So I appreciate being intentional about that. I also, I could see, Matt, to your point on kind of just timing, part of what I think we can get hung up on with the outcome piece is just really understanding and getting on the same page in terms of what the problem is and what we can solve, and specifically with this project. And to me, from a planning background, that I just go to like, what is the data? Where are the disparities that we can ensure we are looking at and understanding and drilling in on, and then, through the process piece, talking with the right folks and using this to come back all the time to say, are we improving? Are we making this better? And so that would just be my thought in terms of just getting a little bit more clarity on the outcome piece. And the last comment maybe on that is just, Janelle, I liked how you were saying that, think of the definition maybe as kind of like the North Star. I could see some things that we've had in the city as helpful tools for project teams is just something you can always go back to that's simple. Like, once we know, like, these are the groups that have been underserved and excluded, and having really clear, like, better off statements or measures for any project action, and just asking the question and having it as just a quick reference that anyone on the team can constantly be asking themselves, is this decision, is what we're doing, is it going to address this disparity? Is it going to make a specific group or people better off on the measure that we're talking about? Sorry, that was so long, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nicotris.
That's my same hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Matt, do you have more? No? Okay.
I have to lower my hand. Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. Masha?
Hi, everyone. My name is Masha. I work at IRCO, Immigrant Refugee Community Organization, specifically with the Slavic Eastern European community. Thank you so much. Really happy to be part of this team. Really appreciate everyone's comments and everything that's been said and added to this. In terms of the definition, I'm kind of looking back on some of the statistics that were shown earlier with the outreach, community outreach and engagement. And I just have some questions in terms of one of the graphs that I saw, and I saw that there was Slavic community participation, but in general, just wondering in terms of outreach, I know things have gone out in different languages, in 8 different languages, but knowing, for example, the Slavic community, and I know it could be for many other different communities, is it's the 3rd biggest refugee community, or the 2nd biggest refugee community in this area, if not the 1st. And I saw that most of the responses came from white and Caucasian, and I'm just wondering as to why and what gaps are we seeing in those graphics, and how could we be doing outreach to communities such as Slavic and other communities in a better, more efficient way that meets kind of how the communities would respond. I'm just curious to see what your response is, and if you think that it has worked well for some of the different communities and reaching like immigrant communities and other BIPOC communities.
And maybe we can ask Lisa to weigh in here.
Really great feedback, especially as it relates to the community engagement. I'm taking lots of notes. So in terms of some of the outreach specifically to the Slavic community, we did have some the multicultural liaisons that did quite a bit of outreach. And I would say that of the 300 responses that we received, a significant amount of those were from both the Russian and Ukrainian communities. I can get those specific details and follow back up with you. It probably would be helpful for this advisory group to have more of those details in terms of those survey responses based on community and the specific outreach within each of those 8 different languages. So I'm happy to provide that to Jake and for him to be able to send that out. But there's a lot of good comments here that can help us shape that community engagement approach moving forward. And I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
So Jake, thinking about I think Nicotris said that she had some wordsmithing feedback. So please send that to the project team. And for us, we're going to, unless there is another voice that wants to weigh in on this part, we're going to take your feedback and work on incorporating it into the drafted definition to bring back next time. Any other comments on this particular piece? Again, please send wordsmithing to the project team. Janelle?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Roberta. I think you hit that nail on the head. If you have additional thoughts, suggestions, and/or recommendations, please send that along. Our goal is to try to refine it such that we can really come out of this with a definition that is measurable. I mean, what we're not looking for is sort of a lofty, as Greg indicated earlier, a lofty sort of, would get an award in language as it relates to rhetoric, but it's too hard to measure and therefore impossible to know whether or not we've actually achieved our stated goals. So we'll do what we can to try to find that delicate balance because ultimately what we want to spend some time on, particularly I think as we look at our next meeting, is really starting to tease out what would equity look like in the context of a construction project. And that's going to be critically important. And so I thought this was a very rich discussion and terrific feedback. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to shift and we are talking about infusing equity into the purpose and need for this project. I am going to pass it to an environmental team representative.
Angela Finley, who is taking that one.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hunt. Thank you, Jake. Yes, I'm Angela Finley with the environmental team on the program. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of refresher on what is a purpose and need, what is a vision and value, and then we'll get into some of the language that we've included in our draft statement so far. So let's go to the next slide, please. So if you recall from a past meeting, the purpose is what is concisely identifying what the proposed action, or in this case, the IBR program, is intended to accomplish. And the needs are really the problem statements, the fundamental why are we implementing this program? What are we trying to fix? as well. And those could be problems today or problems that we anticipate in the future. Let's go to the next slide. Then we have our vision and values. Sometimes you might have seen these called goals and objectives in other programs. Same thing, just different wording. And these are elements that guide our development, and they are the foundation for developing our evaluation criteria and the metrics that go with that to evaluate the alternatives. Excuse me. I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but I wanted to illustrate how these the purpose and need statements get associated with evaluation criteria. Purpose and need, again, the problem statement are usually a first screen on alternatives to say, does it solve the problem or not? Not how well it does, but just as a minimum, does it solve the problems that were identified? So it's a pass or a fail. And so at minimum, any reasonable alternative must pass or address the program's problem statements. Here on the screen is just a snippet of an evaluation matrix, where on the columns we have the needs statements, the problem statements. On the rows are a handful of alternatives. This is a snippet from the past planning effort, and there are P's for passes in some of the cells, F for fails, so that we can see if an alternative passes all of these need statements, excuse me, then it advances. Advances to further evaluation. If it fails, it is no longer considered. And then on the next slide, this is an example, again, a screening matrix. On this example, we have alternatives across the top, and our screening criteria on the rows. For example, this is illustrating how impacts to the natural, built, and aesthetic environments were rated against 3 alternatives plus a no build alternative or no action if you didn't do any improvement. And they were scored in terms of low, medium, and high. And some fish and wildlife, for example, scored similarly medium, and others scored other like hazardous materials. One alternative scored high. So you can look at the comparative, the pros and cons of each alternatives. The reason I show you this background is because it's going to get to our discussion, which really segues nicely from the past discussion on the discussion around the definition of equity. A lot of people were asking about objectives, or excuse me, about outcomes. And that's exactly where we want to further have some discussion today. So a draft purpose and needs statement, Jake, you had said that that had been sent out to folks earlier this afternoon.
Yes.
And so part of the purpose and needs statement that you received is just the problem statement. We are working on the vision and values. In addition to that, we have also identified 2 critical objectives for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. One is the focus on equity. The second critical objective is on climate. So I just wanted to share with you some of our draft language, and this doesn't take into account, unfortunately, some of the great discussion that we just had. So here is what we have at this time. It is a draft. We will be taking input from this group as well as other advisory groups on the project to shape this and improve on it. I will just quickly read the statements. Include equity as both an outcome and a process throughout the delivery of the program. I saw that on a prior slide. Seek equitable distribution of transportation costs associated with the program. Strive for the fair distribution of benefits and adverse effects of the program for the region, communities, neighborhoods adjacent to the program area. Consider historical impacts to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as economically vulnerable populations when determining equitable outcomes for the program. Engage diverse community groups to ensure program delivery reflects the cultural context and the area history through a celebration of diversity. Provide meaningful, fair opportunities for local, small, and growing businesses, including disadvantaged business enterprises during procurement and contracting, as well as implement an anti-displacement strategy for disadvantaged communities that builds on existing community assets. There's more that we could add to this, or there are probably adjustments that we would love to get your feedback on. I think if we go to the next slide, we have our, yes, infusing our equity into our purpose and needs statement. Again, we have a first draft of this purpose and needs statement, and we wanted to share with you some of the elements that we have woven into the statements. So for example, seismic vulnerability. So we wanted to highlight that seismic vulnerability increases the risk of disrupted interstate travel. It can present a risk of severe disruption to the region, particularly those who depend on the bridge as their primary route, including residents that would be isolated on Hayden Island, as well as in emergency response and region recovery. I will note that, again, our needs are typically transportation based. And so what we try to do where it made sense and where we could really identify the problem statements that affect people, all people, but also particularly our vulnerable populations, disabled populations, BIPOC. Let's go to the next one, congestion and reliability. So on this one, it's focused on traffic congestion, travel reliability, while contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and inequity of transportation costs. Specifically, in the draft, we have noted that as affordable housing becomes scarcer, people experiencing low income have moved farther away from major job centers in the region, which lengthens distances traveled, increases time spent commuting to work or obtaining services, and introduces greater risks of job insecurity with less travel reliability. It's a lot packed in there. The second part of that was inequity occurs as those experiencing low income often or more often have greater transportation costs compared to other travelers that can afford housing closer to job centers, and thereby reducing the time spent in congestion. This is, I'm not going to read all this detail on this slide. This is just some of the statistics, the demographic trends that we use to support that in terms of looking at gross rent changes over the past 9 years, 2000 to 2019, growth in both Portland and Multnomah County have increased similarly in Vancouver and Clark County, although not quite as high a percent. The growth of our BIPOC communities as well as medium income housing. Or excuse me, median household income has also increased.
And if I can just kind of, the purpose of these stats is to try to provide some data behind this trend, these trends that we're seeing where folks are moving farther because of the unaffordability of housing, so they're farther from job centers. And then that's causing an increase in transportation costs and those burden and time spent commuting on those communities.
Thanks, Jake. Public transit, again, trying to tease out that those who rely most heavily on public transit, including individuals experiencing low income, people with disabilities, people of color, young people, older adults, anyone facing barriers to accessing living wage jobs, healthcare and education, and other essential services. I'm trying to weave that into the need for reliable public transit. Understanding that growing congestion in the I-5 corridor reduces public transit service, reliability, and travel speed, which can, in some cases, discourage reliance on transit and therefore increases overall transportation costs for those who are seeking more affordable housing and living wage jobs. Looking at key transit infrastructure is needed to promote and encourage local, regional, and state climate actions, as well as to provide equitable access to transportation options. Safety is focused not only on road users, traffic on the local roads, on the highway, but also on the local road system. As the I-5 corridor gets congested, there is a fair amount of diversion onto local roads, which then are running through neighborhoods and causing issues of safety on the local street system. And then also concerned about inadequate walking, biking, rolling facilities, also causing safety hazards in the area. And lastly, we move to our bike and pedestrian need statements, recognizing that the current bridge facilities are not accessible for all ages and abilities, that the connections for the bike and ped facilities in the program area are a little deficient and therefore limit modal choice. And then the current constraints of access to public transit or active transportation can also increase the burden of transportation costs. So those are some of the elements that we have woven into the larger narrative of the purpose and need statement, which you have. I encourage everyone to take some time to digest that statement and provide any feedback that you want. It's very draft. It's going to continue to go through revisions. As I think it was Lisa stated earlier on, as we're looking at finalizing the purpose and need statements, critical objectives, and vision and values by May of 2021. And then I think, Jake, are we going to kind of have an opportunity to break into small groups?
Yes, that is the next thing. So I'm going to throw up these prompts for now, but we're going to break up into small groups and discuss them. But in order to kind of spur the conversation around how, you know, we really incorporate equity into these documents, we wanted to, and I think Roberta, if you can expand upon this as well, we kind of wanted to think of it in terms of the story that's being told here, and try to get at it that way to see if we're really capturing that story and what more we might need. Roberta, do you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, I think, our numbers paint a picture, but does it, I think it's up to us to kind of make the connections between the different areas that we are trying to highlight. And we're wanting to know, are we getting there? And I've heard some saying that the language is not strong enough. And so, like, what needs to be added or emphasized, and what's being left out, what do we need to add? Yeah. And then this last question, what would it look like if the story played out inequitably? So really thinking about what is the outcome that we just do not want to see? And are we in our visioning setting up parameters to keep us from that?
And a point of clarification on that, and I hear your points that you've made, Lily. The idea behind that is not to just say we're only looking to avoid inequities, but the idea behind it is to get us to a place where we can really identify measurable actions, what those measures would be, how we can really determine what equity is, and then back that up by our evaluations.
Nicotris?
Is this discussion, or what we're trying to do is, in terms of capturing the story of what equity means, we are connecting that first slide from this session, from this point, that really dove into what equity might mean in the purpose and need statement, because that's not explicitly in the statement. So is that what we're trying to put in there through other language?
Yeah, it's the language that that Angela ran through, and you should have it in the same email I highlighted in that purpose and need working draft document, highlighted those pieces of language that are equity focused. That's the language we're focused on here, and that we'll break into small groups and discuss further. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can I see the first slide again?
Which the very first, like
that one, thank you. Nope.
The critical objective.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jake, if I could just add on to what you said, is think about how these statements translate to evaluation criteria that that we would, as the program, ultimately screen, and that we would want to have a way of measuring them, which could be quantitatively or measure them qualitatively in a comparative fashion, so that we know which alternative is achieving these elements better than others. And so the more work that we can do to identify those positive outcomes that we're looking for from the program and capture them here in this equity objective, that would be really helpful.
Lily?
Thank you. This is Lily. Angela, or anyone really, my apologies if I missed this, but in order to evaluate if the story being told by this document is effective, I need to know who the audience is. So who are we trying to convey this story to?
Think of this as the framework for developing a solution. It'll be documented in a public document that will serve multiple audiences, but ultimately these are the elements that translate into how we evaluate alternatives so that we can identify the solution that brings about the most benefits or the preferred benefits to the community. So we need a way of evaluating how alternatives, how well they achieve those benefits or not. Does that help, Lily?
Kind of. I feel like there's two questions being asked. So one is about a background document that sort of explains the need. And then the second request is about proposing evaluation criteria. Am I coming through? I'm getting a message that my internet is not being kind. You can hear me? Okay. Thank you. So I can try to address each of those separately. But I guess so, and I am most comfortable in the personally most comfortable in the proposing evaluation criteria realm. But for the narrative of your background document, it sounds like the audience is everybody. Is that true? Like the whole world?
It's really framing the program. So it is for is for all of the stakeholders of the program so that we are clearly defining what the problem is that we're trying to solve and how we are evaluating the effectiveness of each alternative to solve those issues and to achieve project objectives and desirable outcomes.
So how I understand it, Angela, is that this purpose and need sets up is the document that says why we need this bridge, and that this document is for the feds to say this is why we in Oregon and Washington feel we need this bridge. It's for Washington and Oregon for our state bodies to have agreement. This is why we need this bridge. And for the cities connecting to be able to say, yes, we all understand that this is why we need this bridge, and these are the focus areas for this bridge. And for our broader community to also influence that so that we have more benefits for this bridge. Would that be correct, Angela?
Yes, I mean, it's a federal, state, and local program that we are looking for a solution that not only meets the requirements for the funding that may be received from federal sources, but also it's delivered in a manner that fits for this community. So, that's why we are working with groups like this, as well as our regional partners, to cities, to transit agencies, to ports, and to metropolitan planning organizations to really identify how best to deliver this bridge replacement and associated improvements that fit the needs of this community. So again, I mean, I'm just having a hard time, I guess, answering the question on the audience, because it is this community that this program is for, because so much of the community is affected one way or another about how this bridge works today or doesn't work today. But thank you, Roberta. I think you did a good job of trying to parse it out.
Maybe with that, we can
maybe Kate first and then move into our group.
Great.
Sorry, I was kind of putting my hand down and then back up, but this is Caitlin with City of Portland again. I think that what you guys were just discussing is what was kind of hanging me up and I was having questions on too. And Lily, I think that you got it well. It seems that we are being shown kind of this updated purpose and need with some language highlighted that starts to get at the equity issues and considerations within these needs, within that framework. But then there's also the vision and values, which would later be used as an evaluation criteria. So it feels like a lot to answer these questions for both of those right now. It's a lot of material. So, but if that's the objective, if that's the goal, I'm game to go along with it. But I think it's a valid question and point of clarification that they're to be used in different ways as well.
All right, Brent, can you put us in our small groups?
Your breakout rooms will open automatically. Encourage you to turn on your video. These are 20-minute breakout rooms, and for the public viewing on YouTube, you will have an interactive session as well.
And just real quickly, if every group could identify a recorder and someone who will report out, it could be the same person. We'll have report out when we get back to the full group here.
Thanks, Jonelle. Opening all rooms now. And for those of you joining on YouTube by the public, thank you for joining. We have an interactive session for you if you would like. If you go to https://www.menti.com, and the participant code is 82664659. Again, that's https://www.menti.com, and the enter code is 82664659. And you can enter in as many submissions as you would like. Look forward to seeing what everyone puts in there. Thank you to those of you joining via YouTube tonight. We do have an interactive poll, not poll, but type of a survey or input, I would say. And the website is https://menti.com. And the code is 82664659. And it looks like we have another 9 minutes on our breakout session, and we appreciate your patience.
Are y'all back?
Brent, I'm going to take over your screen share because while we are in there, we gave members of the public the chance to get to that inequity question, and we had 6 responses here. And what it's shown is the question they proposed is, what would it look like if the IBR program was inequitable? And the responses were, if the end result does not serve the entire population, if people are not given a choice in how they cross the bridge, not addressing past harms, longer commutes for those who live outside of the work centers, if it prioritized individual car/truck drivers over pedestrian, bike, wheel travelers, and mass transit users, if it did not prioritize contracting with minority-owned or women-owned businesses, and process that is too fast to truly examine and understand impacts. So thank you, members of the public, for participating in that.
I want to be mindful of time. How many people do we have to speak for public comment?
I know there was at least one. Brent, is there more than one?
That person has since dropped off, but if we go to the slides and provide them with the information and the opportunity for that.
Okay, well, I'm really asking because we don't, I'm wanting to know how we have time for feedback from the groups.
Yeah, we're running a bit long. Let's try to do public comment and then go back to the report outs. Does that work, Roberta?
Okay. If we have more public comment, if people people could email your comments from your group to the project team. I know that my group's comments really echoed a lot that was in that previous slide, but if we can have that, if people can email to the project team if you do not get to report out.
Great, so we can go ahead and do public comment. I'll just read this real quickly. If you have joined by Zoom, click the raised hand feature and we will call on you at that point. If you have joined by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. The facilitator will call on participants. You will receive an unmute request. Please accept it. Please provide your name and affiliation. Typically we have about 10 minutes for public comment, dependent upon how many folks we have. We will limit public comment to 2 minutes per person. Next slide here. To submit comment after the meeting, you can fill out the comment form on program website or email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment and the subject line. All comments received after the meeting will be distributed to the EAG members prior to their next meeting. And of course, you can call 360-859-0494 or 503-897-9218, or if you prefer an 800 number, 188-503-6735, and state EAG public comment in your message.
And just FYI, we did not receive any EAG specific public comments since our last meeting, so that's why you did not receive any.
Okay. So Britt, with that, if you can inform us if the committee has any public comment, and we'll invite them.
We're not seeing any public comment right now, John L. But for members of the public viewing on YouTube, take a look at the descriptions of the YouTube link, and you will see the call-in information with the meeting codes in there if you'd like to provide public comment.
And we should give it about a minute because I understand there's a delay between Zoom and YouTube. But perhaps what we can do is do a quick report outs, and then Brent, you can flag if someone does call in with public comment.
Sounds good, Jake.
Nate, will you start us off?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Great.
Great. So I kind of posed the comments into different questions. So one of the biggest questions that our group, included was, how can equity be infused into the policy and practices of this program? There was some concern around communities already being excluded from the work. So how can we lift up our most vulnerable and underrepresented communities in this work? Let's see here. And one other important piece was around how to provide training for people, especially young folks, to provide opportunities for them to be involved in this work, provide good paying trade jobs, and increase representation of different communities and those trade industries. Did I leave anything out, Roberta?
I think the how to include people with disabilities in the thinking about opportunities and access related to this project, and making sure that all of our, that I think some concerns that we're going too fast, and that it's hard to wrap one's head around all that we're doing, and that because we're moving so fast, people may not be able to participate as much as they would if we had the opportunity for a slower roll. Next up.
I was the recorder for my group, and want to acknowledge that there was some confusion in these questions. I apologize for that, but I think we had a good discussion. I hope you all did too. We focused on sort of the in terms of the story of this bridge and equity in relation. We talked about needing to go further than the needs of right now and really looking at generations down the road and thinking about needs of communities in that way. In terms of looking at what an inequitable project might be, if we should be asking the question of benefits for each of these communities that we are focused on, and how that community benefits and what the specific benefits would be to that community. If the processes were not accessible, were inequitable, and really looking at the valid options, the real options, like transportation options that this creates. It's not enough to just have a bus. It's got to be service that people can rely on, for example, and not. It would be a problem if we just stuck to really the bare minimum, the legal requirements. I really liked, it was Meg talked about ambitious design, and how if we just plan to code, you're gonna get the worst possible project that still technically complies and passes the, checks the box or whatever. So we wanna go beyond that, much not focus on the floor, but our aspirations.
Next, we have 4 minutes. Come, loves.
I can share. I was in Janelle's group. This is Sabrina with Metro. So I'd say the theme of our conversation really was about how we're centering this work around people. And to the question of kind of what would help tell the story better, there were a few things that we named. First, we talked a lot about economic benefit and, whether it's contracting or job creation, and that really not being in the document right now as we talk about the need. And then I think across the board, whether it's something like seismic reliability or congestion, being really clear about Steve framed it really well, for who, to whom, and how. Being really clear on the people impact and not just on the structure itself. And then on the conversation around inequitable, what would an inequitable project look like? It would be a project that had a lot of outreach and there was no connection to how it influenced decision-making. It wasn't clear that that showed up in the impact and the project that we end up in. And we know that there will be trade-offs and we're not going to get everything that we want. Or I don't know if we know that, but if that was the outcome, that communities that were engaged in the process were not informed of the shifts in direction. Low minority business participation and increases in property taxes were specific things that were named.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate the specific pieces. Okay, so it is 7:29, so I have to abruptly end us. Our next meeting is Monday, March 29th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We will start promptly, and I would appreciate for the group facilitators to please send their comments to the team, particularly some of these specific points. They're very, very valuable. Janelle or Greg, do you all have anything that you would like to say before we close?
I yield to Greg. Greg?
I hear the concern wrapped around time, and I understand that we're going at a pretty good clip. So we are not going to miss any steps. And when we need to slow the train down, we will slow the train down. But one of the things that I've been charged with is getting this to a decision, so funding decisions can be made and not miss those windows. But I hear you guys. I hear that time is short. So if we need more time, if come May we haven't settled on what purpose and need and vision and values look like, I promise you, we will not move forward until everybody has had their voice heard on this. So it's a balance. So we're gonna try and make it work for everybody.
All right. All right, thank you. Janelle, do you wanna say anything more?
I just want to thank you all for your candid participation and feedback. We're going to continue to work at this. And just so thrilled to have all of you around this table working with us as we, this is what it feels like to be on the cutting edge in a mega project, is the conversations we're having with respect to equity. At times may be a little uncharted because we are actually on the pioneering end of this. And so keep pushing us, keep offering good feedback. Please do send us your comments and thoughts. And again, we'll have more discussion at next meeting. So thank you all. Really appreciate you. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.